Welcome in. I think everybody here is familiar with Oakridge-Westfir and who we are. For those of you online who aren't, what we are is a group of citizens that's under right now South Willamette Solutions, but hopefully is going to be adopted by a whole city approach in the future. And part of that is looking at what's in the Oakridge Emergency Operations Plan. So my name is Dustin. I've helped to facilitate this Oakridge-Westfir group for a while. We also have Gwen DeJoya here, who is now the Disaster Resilience Coordinator for our organization. So she's kind of going to be taking more of the reins on that going forward. And we're really happy to have an excellent group of folks from the city. Really, really huge kudos for all these folks showing up. This is going to be recorded, so we're going to make sure this is a resource that people can have in the future to talk about this really important emergency operations plan, which, you know, is a draft right now, but it is something that is definitely what the city's talking about using. There's a lot of complex things going on in it, but there's also a lot of simple common sense things going on in this plan. So, you know, today by the end of it, we basically want you to know what each part of the city is going to potentially be doing in operations. This is an all hazards plan. As we'll talk a little bit about all the different kinds of hazards that it could apply to. But for the most part, this is something that could apply to any kind of disaster. And so when we talk about disaster versus emergency, it is called an emergency operations plan, but we did have, you know, one of our partners from the county ask, when I think of an emergency, I think about, you know, just calling 911 or whatever. And so according to the plan, a disaster is an emergency that utilizes a significant proportion or all of the city's emergency response resources. And so this kind of plan is something that we're looking at for a few different major disasters. And so I was asked by James to kind of cite, we recently passed, or the city recently incorporated into the county's natural hazard mitigation plan, and they identified the top 5 hazards that are most likely to have a high impact. That'd be wildfire, flood, winter storm, windstorms, and drought, but there's a whole bunch of other ones this could apply to. And so all of those are also included in annexes in the current plan. There are a bunch of phases of disaster that go through every kind of disaster, so we'll go through all of those. But it can be everything from having a warning, right, to how do you mop up afterwards. Some don't have any warning at all. Each different one will have different parts of the city that can mobilize for different parts of this disaster. So are there any questions before we get started and hand it over to Gwen to hand it over to the city, or anything that we want to talk about first? Cool. All right. Well, we're going to highlight an emergency operations center, which is a big part of any city's disaster plan, and is also something that we've been working on with a tentative new emergency operations center with the Willamette Activity Center. So we want to kind of highlight that as sort of the nucleus of the base, which is something that some of these folks will talk about today. I'm going to hand it over to Gwen to talk about.
Hello. We're gonna swap spots. Talking about the WAC as the emerging emergency operations center. What is an operations center? It's a place where folks like I have to my left and people who work with them would go to support all the kinds of responses that would happen during an emergency. And also it will be a place where community members can go in case of an emergency. The gym, the old gym, which is this kind of lower portion, is going to be the emergency shelter location, and places where people can get food or supplies, just regular public folks. And then we see in the red at the top, that is the EOC, the Emergency Operations Center. That'll house all of our emergency operations folks, people who are doing the work to keep everybody safe. And then support would be potentially people who are a member of a community emergency action team. And then the other cool thing about the WAC is the hope is to have backup power. We're going to have solar. The generator is highlighted on the left-hand side. And that is kind of the idea of the new potential WAC location. Currently, though, the Emergency Operations Center is within the fire department. So it will really only be kind of like a hop and a skip away to the WAC in the future. So with that, the folks who are going to be operating here, or currently will be operating out of the fire department, will be our chain of command folks. And I can introduce. So kind of at the top of this slideshow, this is our key personnel. We have City Administrator James Clevenger, He will be kind of leading everything up. Then we have our policy group that is also being headed up by the mayor, Brian Kitchen. And then we have operations, which is fire and EMS, Scott Follett. Then we have police, Evan, don't even know where relations anymore. Evan Martin. And then we have planning and public works, utilities, that's Rick Zilstra. And many other really important things that they aren't going to cover tonight. So if you're interested, there's the emergency operations plan that's in draft that you can review. But without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to James. And if you need the mic, James, or if anybody needs the mic, please feel free to grab it.
Thanks, Gwen. All right, so as a city administrator, I basically serve two roles. Main one is for managing the emergency operations center, standing it up, making sure that all the equipment available. If for some reason our EOC was hit with a disaster, I would then have to choose a secondary location. So, you know, as Gwen said, right now the fire department serves as our EOC. So the WAC is refurbished, have a real EOC with all the bells and whistles, and it's already been grant funded, so that is coming within a year or so. We're definitely excited about that, as that will increase our capabilities dramatically. So basically, so I've got to make sure everything's in running order there. And then I also have to appoint a public information officer to make sure the information is being put out through official city channels, meaning city website, city's Facebook page, is accurate. As we all know, Facebook provides lots of rumors. It's not coming from a source that is City of Oakridge. Take it with a grain of salt. Make sure you're getting the stuff from the city, or better yet, from the county. Clean Alerts is a system you can sign up for. Haven't already, basically like the reverse 911 system. So if there's something in your neighborhood, such as fire, what we do is we will call into the county control this and request that they do a reverse 911 text or phone call to find out and search your fraction area. Relatively new, but you know, a couple of years, so it's hit or miss. I know some folks complain of not getting alerts they thought they would. That could actually be system broken or user error. You're signing up, I don't know, but it's getting better. Sticking with that's the only option we have. Again, that's controlled by the county, but it's not something that we can put out. The city has looked into doing reverse 911. It's just really cost prohibitive by the system and kind of duplicative considering we do have one that we can utilize. With allowance for the county to do so, which they're. So yeah, so it's all going to depend, situation dependent on who I would choose as public information officer. Because some of my staff who normally put out messaging in the city may not be able to get in. They Gene or live up on High Prairie, perhaps not able to get in. So I may end up appointing myself, get that information out to folks. So that's my responsibility after the mayor or the governor there's a disaster. I'll turn it over to the mayor to
Yeah, good evening, Brian Ketchen, Oakridge Mayor. The mayor is a political head of the city, so that's why you see the duties there. Declare an official disaster. So why is that important? So you can declare a disaster at a local level. That allows you to have some city administrator and the finance director have some flexibility in budgeting, as far as exceeding budget limits. But then if it's a more widespread disaster and it's the county declares disaster or the governor, it actually gets you more resources at the county and state level that might come in. If the feds agree with that, then that obviously opens up FEMA funding, in the, in retrospect, but also some FEMA assets that might come in. So it's important, and I can declare, it's a time critical thing, I can declare a disaster immediately, but if it goes an extended period of time, then I would gather the city council and they would have to pass a resolution declaring that disaster. Next duty for me would be to communicate with higher government officials. So there's one good thing that's come out of all the wildfires, Snowmageddon, it's that we have developed really tight relationships with those external organizations, whether it be the electeds, your state representative, your federal representative, or senators, as well as ODOT, Lane County, the governor's office, all these folks, the state fire marshal, we've developed really close and great working relationships with those folks. And we know we've gotten a good sort of, I guess it would be almost an immersion into the incident command system. And so we know the staff has had to talk that talk. So it's, that's a good thing about it. But when it comes to my role, obviously if something came up and I was sitting at the USC and we needed some support, I'd be able to reach out to all those individuals that not as individual over what we needed and get that support coming in. So that's, and that would, with me doing it, at least it's, one person speaking to a higher chain of command, because you don't want multiple people trying to communicate with the city administrator, the fire chief, and the police chief will all have their individual contacts within different organizations, but speaking for the city, it would have to be the mayor. So, and then the last one is just be there. I mean, obviously, I live here, be in the EOC, be able to support folks that are really doing the hard work, whether it be Rick, Kevin, or Scott, that really have the ability to take care of that. And James is kind of the operational lead for the whole effort. So that's what the mayor does, and as well, I would also organize the city council, for emergency meetings and that kind of thing if they are required. So, and probably decorate the ordinances and declarations of the meeting. That's the mayor's role, and I'll hand it off.
Scott. Yep.
The fire department is currently responsible for the mitigating the hazard, determining what resources are needed. We would work with incident command to make sure that whatever we need is ordered, and develop a plan how we're going to mitigate the hazard. We also would help with things like evacuations, notifications to people, and then of course, just no matter what disaster is going on, we still have to manage the day-to-day operations. So we could be having wildfires in the area, in the urban interface, and we're trying to mitigate that hazard, but we could end up with an ambulance call in the middle of it. So we still have to have those resources available and call for those. But also, I just want to put in kind of a plug for the readiness team is such a valuable asset for boots on the ground for the fire department. Some of the things that it doesn't have to be, the worst disaster that we've had in 5 years. It could be a structured fire. So anytime we get a major incident, even like a structured fire, railroad incident, a major incident on the highway, our teams are out there to mitigate that hazard. And we don't have the people that are trained to do those things need to be involved in that. We have other things that go on that readiness teams could make a huge difference in. And one of those is during structure fire, one of the things that we're required to have is a firefighter rehab, which means it's a place for the firefighters to go after they've been in a structure fire, they've exhausted SCBA bottles, and they've done the work that they can do. We need to go to a place where people can take care of them, make sure that they're being hydrated, being cooled down, Their vital signs are checked. One of the leading causes of firefighter fatalities is cardiac events, and those do occur frequently during these types of incidents. And some of our rehab teams in the past have actually caught people that were having cardiac issues with an accelerated heart rate. They were not allowed to go back into the scene because firefighters are those kind of people that once they're ready to go, they want to go back in and do what they were doing, but we've had to transport people. But if it wasn't for those folks doing rehab, that may not have been caught. Some of the other things that are really helpful, if we have had a major incident where we had multiple patients, community response members could do triage and sort those patients and help determine which patients need to go now and which patients can wait. And anybody can be trained to do those things. Also, you know, if we need a helicopter landing zone, community response people could do a landing zone setup. Just one big thing that did occur, and you know, the big winter storm 2019, we had a 5-day period where we had 87 911 calls, and that doesn't include all the calls that we got at the fire department. We were so short-staffed that we were having to use our medical people to man the telephones at the station and to help with radio communications and to help do phone triage. So we had serious patients. Those got taken first. The people that we were doing welfare checks on, they got bumped to the back. But if we had an emergency response group that could go in and do those welfare checks, that frees up the ambulance and the medical crews to be able to take care of the more serious incidents. During that incident, we delivered a baby. We were on scene for, I think, 4 or 5 hours. And so we had to have an ambulance there to take care of that situation. And then we also had a major cardiac event and ended up transporting 3 patients to the hospital in 1 ambulance because that's all we could do. So in those circumstances, that response team would be so valuable. And I would just hope that we can get this established and get this program going.
Thank you, Scott. So next is Chief Martin.
Well, first of all, I'll say thanks for coming, everybody. And as Scott said, we really do need more volunteers. I like the CERT idea. I like having neighborhood type leaders that we could get. We just need more volunteers for that. And I want to thank the people that have volunteered for that. Everybody else, please talk to your neighbors. Even if you can't do anything, talk to your neighbors that can. In a lot of your emergency situations, we have emergency situations all the time that are small scale. I'll give you an example of how stuff can happen and people can help. We had a barricaded subject earlier last week, and I called the mayor and I had the mayor do some calls for me because I was managing 2 phones and a radio. And I just couldn't, we didn't have the capacity. So the mayor actually made some calls for me and arranged us to set up a command post, and we didn't end up using it. But I mean, that's just how things can go in that situation where we can use our resources. And in most emergencies, people don't realize because they're having a crisis too, but sometimes in our emergencies, regular police work happens. Snowpocalypse was a perfect example. We were very busy during that time frame, but we still had DVs in progress where we had to go do police work. And our department's small, so sometimes there's challenges with being able to manage regular work and then the emergency work. In the past, I've set up and maintained the EOC, where my personnel do that. Our civilian staff, Sergeant McPherson's helped with that a lot. Mayors and counselors have helped with that. And going back to kind of that, the mayor talked about declaring the emergency declaration. Rick and I had to go to a mayor's house at the time and talk to her and kind of walk her through what was going on, and she needed to declare that emergency, so we helped some staff. we've all been through the fires and people have been through snowpocalypse and, so we do have struggles there. So the volunteers could help with EOC. I have acted as incident commander before on several different occasions. Sometimes it can be me, sometimes it can be Scott, sometimes it can be Rick. Another thing I'd like to really point out to everybody, sometimes Scott and I help Rick on public works stuff, and sometimes public works helps police and fire department on our stuff. So we use the resources we have. May I give you an example? There's 4 of my department that lives here in Oakridge, but most of our reserves don't live here, and some of our officers don't live here. So in sometimes emergencies, they have no way to get here. Another example of that would be during snowpocalypse, we got help from Klamath County before we got help from any other agencies because their way became clear first. And it was very nice because up until that point, we were also handling the Lane County Sheriff Department law enforcement calls because they had no way to get here.
Speak up a little.
Speak up a little, okay. Assisting in evacuations, we have lots of experience with that with our fires over the last few years. We have helped Lane County Search and Rescue a lot with that, both in our neighborhoods and in the county neighborhoods adjacent to the city. That's kind of all hands on deck sometimes. We've had those evacuation notices, and people don't realize that there's some places, especially in the county area, where there's some compounds that's not safe for normal people to go and do an evacuation. So law enforcement has to do that. And we are all short-staffed agencies. And then the last part we would help is back to that life safety, where a lot of times my people are helping Scott's people and his people are helping my people. That we have many little incidents all the time, whether it's a crash on the highway or a house fire, or we get some kind of barricaded subject, or we have a major incident. We like to have the unit on standby. And then I'd like to give a couple of thoughts for people. Us living out here, you should always be prepared for like 2 weeks. Have 2 weeks of supply, like prescriptions, food, a little bit of gas. You could do that evacuation. We've had several times when either gas has been sold out or the gas pumps didn't work. Again, know kind of your neighbors in your little neighborhood, because you might be the only way that somebody gets checked on when we're crazy busy and our staff is past capacity. And we have used those resources in the past where we've been able to get a hold of community members and say, okay, no, I checked on Mr. and Mrs. So-and-so down the street. You don't need to do that. Adult services has helped us a lot in that. So know your neighbors. If you have neighbors that are elderly and need help, or anybody that needs help, keep that in the back of your head. Be a good neighbor. Other than that, all I was going to say is please volunteer. Please volunteer.
Sweet. Thank you, Chief Martin. Next up is Rick.
So for Public Works, since all the other agencies, different emergencies typically need different requirements. But for Public Works, retaining and keeping normalcy is one of our biggest and most important things. And when I say normalcy, what that really means is water flowing and the waste exiting and streets that are passable. When we go through emergencies, one of the things that really makes a difference in emergencies is whether we have power. If we don't have power, we are generated. So one of our main focuses is putting fuels into generators, and that's our generators for our well systems and our wastewater treatment systems, and also for the fire department as well. We will transport those fuels around. But what that also means is we need to sometimes clear the roads. So being in control of the roads, whether it's clearing or in some of the recent fires we've had on the highway, we'll go out there and flag to keep the general public away from dangerous situations. Outside of those 3 utilities, I like to consider ourselves as backup support for these gentlemen here. We go where we're needed. But keep in mind that our top priorities are those utilities, keeping the water on. During snow apocalypse, I know we're always referring to that one. Keeping the water on and the waste flowing was was a concern because of getting fuel into town. So getting those roads open and available to those generators was one of our main focuses. And then once we had that pinned down, we were able to spread out and help out where we could with opening roads, making things passable where possible, and then helping out where needed. Those are where Public Works really steps up and helps out, is keeping those utilities functioning for the benefit of everybody. Yes, so basically what we see there is getting everything running.
Cool. Thank you, Rick. Now we're gonna go back to Dustin to chat about Unified Command.
So I don't want to get too far into this. For those of you that were into our incident command system presentation, we went slightly into this. But what I do want to highlight is that for a lot of these disasters that we're used to, especially wildfires in the community, you're going to be working, and the city's going to be working with a bunch of other agencies. And so there is this option for the initial responding incident command to have unified command with other agencies, often the Forest Service or BLM or whoever else. And then it could go all the way up, like Kevin was mentioning, Chief Barton was mentioning, up to using the National Guard or whatever in certain situations. And oftentimes, as James was pointing out, for a lot of these situations, when the county is able to, the county ends up assuming basic command structures over a lot of this stuff. And so that's the really high level. We want to point that out. But the thing that we're talking about, and like Scott talked about with using, community response teams, and the team that we're talking about here, is that we might have all those resources. We might have the county, we might have the Forest Service, or we might be an island, right? Oakridge, as with Snowmageddon, was almost entirely an island, right? And so it can go all the way from having these large resources to having only the police officers who live in town, only the public works people who are here and available, and only the citizens who are trained and able to plug into the system that exists within the emergency operations plan. And so that's kind of like where we're talking about what Scott was talking about and what we're talking about here. And you remember on the original, that's cool. Yeah, this is a great slide. So on the original hierarchy thing where we looked at, where it had city administrator down through mayor, over to the side, it had public information officer, and it also had a CERT team. So a CERT team is a community emergency response team, which is a formal FEMA organized thing that trains folks to be able to plug into a lot of the situations that we're talking about today, where official professional first responders have a gap. And that's kind of what we're talking about today. And I was actually at a meeting today where I talked to the head of Lane Emergency Management. She's super excited about that prospect. And I know a lot of other folks are excited about that. So that's something that's coming forward. So the idea is, where do we fit in? Where do you fit in? Where do the folks who are online and in this room? We've heard a couple of ways that we might be able to fit in a disaster, but you did the animation. Thank you. Yeah, I did that with my really professional Microsoft Paint skills. And so that's where we come in, is either in the sort of informal group or a more formal city sanctioned group, or a government sanctioned group like a CERT. And so we kind of wanted to open this up to talking about what we can do today, have some discussion questions, but we also do have a couple of documents up here. These are both after action reviews for the winter storm in 2019 and the evacuation from Cedar Creek. And in both of those, one of the main takeaways is that we need community response teams to be able to plug some of these gaps that happen there. Not because everybody wasn't doing their best in these situations, but just because it was such an overwhelming situation in both times. And people did great, right? Neighbors came together and helped neighbors. But in order to plug into something where we can do this beforehand and be able to be part of an organized plan. So, one thing that I did have a few people request, and we get this mentioned every time, just a little go back for evacuations, because that's one of the things we're talking about. That's always under the county sheriff's purview, right? And so that's one thing that local emergency managers always want to clear up. So there's another little caveat that I forgot to go back on earlier. So some people might find that their role is being very mobile. One of the things we have, and if you go back outside onto our resource table, we have a couple of resources. One of them is a sheet, so you can put okay or not okay on your window. And so we ask our neighborhood leaders who are trying to recruit to take those, pass them out to their neighbors. And so emergency, if you did have a medical emergency and you had a designated neighborhood leader, they could go by and see that somebody's asking for help or not. We encourage you to take those. Yeah, go ahead. Oh, yeah, one of those right here. So this is modeled off of something that was called Map Your Neighborhood. The county has since discontinued it, so we made our own version of it. So please take these. It's also got a phone tree, neighbor contact info, another huge thing. So if you don't want to get trained in the 40 hours it takes to be a CERT or whatever, something really important that you can do is get a phone tree of all your neighbors to be able to contact if the phones are up in an emergency, and to be able to check on all your neighbors to need that person there. So that's kind of one of the things we've been organizing within this group. Is how do we get folks to be able to do that? And just be able to make sure that folks are okay. If the power is out, somebody needs life-saving medical equipment that requires power or whatever. Like that's one of the main things we look at. And also as a nice handy checklist, as Chief Martin mentioned, we're trying to be 2 weeks ready. I know a few folks are. I know August, our outreach coordinator, has buckets and buckets of disaster prep ready for 2 weeks. I personally don't in my house, and I know a lot of other folks don't. It's really tough to get together, but that's another big thing that people are recommending, especially the county and professional first response agencies. So I'll hand it over to Gwen to kind of lead the conversation and some Q&A for that after this. So we encourage folks in the room to have Q&A. If there's any go backs that you guys on the panel want to go back to, that's perfectly fine too. And I don't see anything in the chat.
We have two questions in the chat.
Great. So start with the chat and then we'll go to the room.
Yeah, so the first question in the chat is, after Paradise was devastated by wildfire and 85 people were killed in 2018, the town installed 20 sirens distributed throughout the area. Has there been any thought to getting a system of sirens here? I was like,
Yes.
anyone can speak to it.
Yeah, back in, I think it was 2020, we looked into the siren on the east and west end of town and perhaps up at Hazeldale Firehouse. Pandemic hit and it just kind of, we didn't have the funds, number one, and we have yet to find funds to be able to do something like that. But it has been looked at. We'd have to work through some of the signaling issues. How do you signal what the emergency is? How do you inform the public what those signals are so they aren't confused where the rendezvous point is?
Excellent. And this one is also online, last one online so far. Will the shelter be open for pets?
It's usually always contemplated in emergency operation plans from the county. For this past summer, we had already arranged to have evacuation center for animals, including livestock, Westridge School. We ended up not utilizing that, instead used air rooms, I think, just because we thought, well, fire's so close to Westridge already, kind of pointless to some of the animals there, and then possibly in another day have to move in. But yes, that's always taken into consideration.
Awesome. Well, those are the only questions we have online so far. Does anyone in the audience have a question?
Okay.
Yeah, I'm really concerned about this whole situation of communication. Siren's a great idea, but again, our good mayor explained that it was brought up not 1, 2, or 3, but like 5 years ago. And we're now looking at still the logistics of what the sounds mean, how to put together. We don't have funding for it. And yet we've had lots of funding going through the town in the last 5 years and never rose to the top. And yet when we really come down to it, communication is job number one. I happen to be without electricity right now. And without electricity, that means the cell service is less than perfect or non-existent. And again, we depend on our cell service. I think we need to have a program to bring together this communication. Cell service is number one. If we can upgrade our cell service, we've got things out there to so forth. That is how we're going to communicate to each other. And that's how we're going to get the help we need to get people going in the right direction. And that wasn't a question, but I mean, that's.
I was like, I think that was all a statement.
Comments are all right.
Yes.
Let me just ask the police chief, in the absence of a siren notifying of an emergency, what would the police do to let citizens know that there was an emergency?
When we have time in the past, we've gone out, knocked on everyone's door. So That's both the police department and Lake County Search and Rescue has done that multiple times in the past for our fire evacuations. So, and then the reverse happens, like during a different type of incident, like snow apocalypse. We also did documents as this police, fire, anybody we get, we're doing so many welfare checks that we actually had to scale those back to deal with emergency calls or that. So that's where it's certainly done that. I will say this, a little bit of walk back though. Please don't call us with and ask when the power's gonna be back on or when the road's gonna be open. I know everybody just yearns for information when that type of stuff is going on, but that really interrupts traffic for emergency stuff. I mean, typically speaking, if we have a phone bank, there's only 5 or 6 people doing that. And a lot of times it's just Sergeant McPherson and people get downright cranky with her when she doesn't have those answers. I'll give an example. The city can't speak for the school. There's school board members here. The school board can't speak for the city. We can't speak for Lane Electric. We can't speak for the cell phone companies. It's a hard thing because everybody wants information. But again, that goes to remember to look at the city information, the school information, that type of thing. So you know you're getting your stuff from a trusted source.
And I will say that a lot,
Oh, we do have, sorry,
Let's do a quick go back on this. I think this is a good plug for why to have our neighborhood groups is because then within your neighborhood, you have a phone tree and the neighbors can take care of getting information out to everyone, not always be looking to the city. So that's one of the things, if this program gets up and going, whether or not it's a full blown CERT or not, when we do have the zones and actual active neighborhood leaders who can then get a neighborhood tree, that can help take some of the burden off the city.
And one of my ultimate goals would be if we get a robust, at least a core group of certified CERT type people, is to be able to give those core group people a radio. And we're trying to forward plan to get a radio frequency for emergency management stuff. There's that costs and there's a lot of working parts to that, but my ultimate goal would be that those CERT people would be able to get a radio and be able to communicate important stuff back to.
Like a ham radio?
No, like an actual like government type of radio. Ham radio is probably a different thing, but which is also beneficial during those times, but an actual radio for the CERT teams to use to talk to my people and Scott. That's in general.
We're hopefully going to have a presentation on different kinds of radio communications for emergency, everything from walkie-talkie to ham sometime in late winter, early spring. One other plug we have to talk about, if you haven't signed up on the sign-up sheet outside, that's how you get into the raffle drawing for today. So just FYI, if you haven't done that, that was the one thing that I was supposed to mention.
and we have another question online that ties in perfectly with this conversation and and the question is, what is the process to become a CERT member?
Well, I've been through the CERT process. So currently in Lane County, you basically have to take 16 hours of online courses that basically talk about everything from incident command system to how to stop a bleed, to how to triage a situation. And then it culminates in about 21 hours of in-person training, including a long weekend where you literally go out and go to mock exercises and do all those things, do a tabletop exercise. And that's basically your test at the end of things. So it is quite a bit of commitment to be an official CERT. And that's what the Lane County Emergency Manager told me today. We have talked about doing a CERT Lite where we could talk about, one of the big things that Tiffany talked about today, the head of EM, was what exactly does the city need? If we can identify those needs, and we can talk about that maybe a little more if you guys want to, but what are the holes that we really think we might need to plug? Then we might be able to get the training to the point where we could get an Oakridge CERT that's a little less intense, but really speaks to the kind of holes that we might really need to plug in an emergency situation. So it's, like I said, it's an official FEMA training, and we have to figure out, there are different consultants that do it in private companies, and there are agencies that do it in Eugene and Springfield. Unfortunately, this year, the Eugene Springfield CERT, which is open for anybody in the county to go to, was during a bunch of festivals and activities that were going on here in Oakridge. So none of our main folks could make it. But if we could just get 4 or 5 folks signed up for it eventually, that would be, I think, critical mass enough for at least Chief Martin. So.
Anybody else
What I've
have?
heard today that, as far as the roles of a CERT for this city, what I've heard from these folks, triage would be one of them. Maybe phone bank manning, they were qualified to do that, communications and communications network. welfare checks. I mean, that's a short list, you can go on and on, but to me, those seem like to be the most low hanging fruit.
Yeah, I mean, I think that like the Marcola CERT put up sandbags during the floods there, during the pandemic, for instance, was in charge of handing out a bunch of different PPE, but phone banking is a really common one. We did learn to do stuff like do cribbing for giant rocks to get people out of earthquake zones. I doubt that that'd be something you do as a CERT, but you do get trained to do it. So yes, there are all kinds of applications you could imagine.
Any more questions in the audience? Sorry, I stifled some.
I didn't have a question, but talking about the siren, I grew up in a town with, we had total volunteer fire. Spread out all, small ones, little neighborhoods. But we had one siren, and what that was to rally everybody. Basically alert the team, is what you're saying. And if we had the radios, that would probably suffice, but, just getting everybody alert. Either call in on their phone if they can, or go to whatever site is designated so that all those things take place. Whatever. You don't need a sick, like SOS code that people are gonna have a hard time understanding. Just a loud noise.
We used to have a siren many years ago.
Yeah,
And I don't,
Sorry.
I think it was at noontime or something. It was just a test siren.
Hmm.
We've been here that long and we have had sirens in the past.
It was on top of the old fire station.
Yeah.
Oh.
Because I know we could hear our house on the farm road.
Go ahead, Ken.
Yeah.
Spectrum. They sent me a text this morning when I didn't have internet. I don't know how they did it, but I was without power, without internet, and yet my cell phone gave me I'm just saying again, look at the technology we have out here and figure out how we could be part of the first lines of communication. And I think the siren's a great idea, but I just really think everybody has their cell phones. Somehow we need to figure out how to make a priority, find out what's going on. And it was really neat because Spectrum was very good about telling me it's going to be another 2 hours, another 2 hours, another 2 hours, as opposed to me phoning up. The point is that technology is changing and we can be part of that.
Well,
Yeah.
on that, we do have the county alert system, which does work, and they can zone in on our area, Oakridge, East Lane alone. To send out, that's how, it did not work well during the Cedar Creek, but since then they have a whole new system that's supposed to be the capabilities that the county can help support that.
If you
Yeah.
can figure out how to sign up, it's a little complex, so we can help you out
Right,
with that.
yeah. I mean, we should definitely make that plug and remind people to sign up for the county alert system. It did switch over to supposedly now states.
And James brought a paper about it and did do a plug about it. So we'll make sure that we share that if we don't already have it shared.
And I think that's where not duplicating things we can get from the county or get from the state, putting our money where we need those added things is important.
Good.
Just a simple thing that a lot of people can do to protect yourself. I think it's cheap insurance. I always pack it when I'm backcountry hunting, but I have a little satellite communicator. It's much cheaper than actually a satellite phone. And I can either text with the device or text from the device to my phone. That's how my wife can track me where I'm at when I'm out hunting. But anybody can go get one of those. I know it's a cost, but it's pretty cheap insurance in an emergency because you can have it not just a small fee a month. That's just something to think about. And that works when cell phones don't work.
So I know you said that you don't want people calling you up all the time asking when the power's going to be back on. What else should I not do as a member of the public in a disaster? What are some other tips for things to make your lives easier?
And bookies,
Don't
Yeah.
wet your house down. You need the water.
Don't respond to scenes that could be dangerous. If we haven't re-contacted you and you know that you're a volunteer for something, you're just causing problems.
Even if it gets you lots of likes on Facebook, probably.
People were in the fire we had this summer, there were lots of people in the way.
Yeah.
We didn't have the resources to fight the fire and do a police investigation and deal with the.
Like, any other questions? Because we could talk about, have them speak specifically to the holes that they're looking for.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we could do that. So I heard a few. I heard phone banking. I heard being able to maybe do wellness checks. What are some other things if a community group got together? And Scott, I know you mentioned a few. I didn't have maybe all of them, but that would be really useful for you guys if you were overwhelmed and maybe say in that worst case scenario where it's just the city and that we have to rely on our own resources. You think of other stuff?
Snowpocalypse, one of the biggest things the police department does deliver formula and diapers and stuff for childcare and food for that matter.
Yeah, the welfare checks was huge.
Yeah, but,
I know, but in Snowmageddon, for instance, when a truck loaded with propane tanks came into town and it was at the Baptist church, most of the people around there did not know that that truck was there with the propane until somebody in the community found out and then told people. And I thought at the time that it would be an idea when you just have any different communities have a person that you let know something was happening so they could just walk the neighborhood and tell people.
Great
There's-
plug, Susan.
There's 12 neighborhoods marked out, correct?
Yeah.
So there's 12 neighborhoods marked out on a map. And the vision would be, and it's Westfir and High Prairie as well, so it's just our greater area. But if we could get a person that could be a community leader for each one of those, that would be huge just for that situation, to know who the neighbors were, to do welfare checks. I mean, at first I didn't like the 12. I thought that's not going to be manageable, but I actually think it's more manageable for one person to do that smaller area. So it's just finding people that want to volunteer in that neighborhood.
Are we ready to start having those organizations, those people appointed and get training and so forth? I mean, I've had 3 meetings now that I've been to, we talked about it.
Yeah, I mean, to be fully transparent, we probably have 2 people who said yes, they want to do it. So we really need to get maybe another 4 or 5 volunteers to really make it worthwhile to get that training, so.
Yeah, or a lot of people who check the box, yeah, I want to do it, but haven't been to a meeting in a year, whatever, that kind of thing. So, I mean, it's tough to commit to that, obviously, but it is.
It's hard to commit to something when you don't know what it's gonna look like, and you don't know how much time it's gonna take. So I think it's worth saying, this training isn't gonna take a lot of time. The initial upfront training will take a lot of time, but once people get that 16, 20 hours out of the way, then it's getting together, 3, 4 times a year and making sure everyone still understands the same plan and doing additional trainings when you need it. So it's not a huge, monthly time commitment necessarily.
And like, yeah, like for instance, we're talking a real CERT, Eugene Springfield CERT does once a month trainings and they're usually pretty fun. Like I said, they're radios and they're talking about different aspects and they're totally optional, but they're good ways to get back together. So the upfront investment, something, but you wouldn't have to be trained in everything to be able to go door to door and do welfare checks, right? We just need to know that you're somebody that's trustworthy. You've been to the meetings and the neighbors trust you. Basically.
I think the other plug I'll make is that, so we have some funding and a training budget to hire trainers. We just need to have people to train. We've been talking with just community members about businesses. If there's businesses that might play a role during a disaster, such as Ray's did, they were critical in being open, the pharmacy, getting their staff some of this basic training so they understand what to expect from the emergency responders and, understand their role. That's another way that we can help the community get more prepared. So I think that's another plug.
I think we could also plug the effort that is going into trying to recruit people are events like this, of course. You in the audience talking to your neighbors, as was said earlier, but we are also having zone parties. Somebody please help me make sure I'm naming the correct zones.
Zones?
But zones 7 and 9. 7, 8, and 9 are our next upcoming zone party. And that is on November
Or
Monday. And then at Green Waters. So for the folks online, you can hopefully see, that is Southeast Oakridge, Dunning Road, and Hills Creek area.
So a lot of those folks on Jasper, Hills Street up there, Salmon Creek Mobile Home Park includes the industrial park, so it's technically our business is gonna be there. But, and you know, if you don't live in that area and you feel like showing up, that's probably okay. I don't think it'll be huge turnout necessarily, but yeah, the idea is just to get 1 or 2 people at each of these. It's gonna be those folks that can commit to doing the work if there's an actual disaster. Yeah.
Yeah, and the places that we've had a zone party already are
Zone 6.
Zone 6. And is that it?
That's it so far, yeah.
That's it so far.
And we probably have another 2 to 3 planned throughout, until next summer. And I think, another thing that we intend to do is go out and talk to groups. So any of the organizations in town, going to them and talking to them and making the pitch there. But if people have suggestions or maybe, organizations or, you know, loose groups that get together to play cards or whatever else, it's a great place. Just go to people and take a look at their time and share, you know, what the intent is.
Yeah, because our whole goal with having Oakridge-Westfir ready, having these learning sessions, having all this is just to get the word out there. There's only so much our organization can do, but again, us, like the chiefs here with Oakridge, we all need kind of that support and as a community to support each other. And honestly, there's only so much that every single person can do. So please.
If you guys didn't already, I think we should give some big credit to Marty and Bev, who've been attending leadership meetings since before this even became, you know, an idea and what it would look like. So we do have a leadership team that meets monthly that helps think around how to do this stuff. So that's the higher level commitment. If people want to do that higher level commitment, they certainly don't have to. They can just sign up for getting some initial training and being ready if there is a disaster.
Yeah, or if you are like, you know what, I've got an extra generator I'm willing to spare, whatever. We have these asset mapping sheets outside that we do hope to use, or if you say, I'm really good at cooking a big old meal for a bunch of people and I know how to make a wood-fired meal. So if the power went out, I'd be able to do that. Sign up for that. That's a commitment you can make in a disaster. Whatever you feel, everybody's got skills and everybody's got something they can contribute. So it can be as small as I'm gonna go knock on my neighbor's door. It can be as large as I'm up on Camp 6 and I've got a snowmobile and I'm gonna take that out to check everybody. And these zones, if you have problems with these zones, let me know. This is sort of something we've vetted, but it's just a way to organize it. It doesn't necessarily have a very scientific method behind it. Okay.
You know, the boundaries on each of the zones.
Sure, yeah,
Mhm.
One outside the zone.
yeah. And we've got a book outside if you want to look at smaller maps.
Okay, folks, we're gonna switch gears a little bit. I'm gonna do the raffle drawing. So we have a $10 gift card to raise and a $10 gift card to Chevron. Thank you guys so much for coming out. This is how much I appreciate. Marty Scott?
Wow.
Which one will you?
Good job, Mike.
Tracy Holland.
Cool.
Yeah, we're at time. We even had somebody from Mackenzie Valley Long-Term Recovery Group join in. They didn't ask a question, but they just said thank you.
Sweet, thanks.
Yeah.
And that's another huge thing that I guess we can not necessarily talk about today, but folks in Mackenzie Valley have got a lot of this kind of stuff set up and, I've absolutely after necessity from Holiday Farm. And so we have talked with a lot of those folks and the neighbors helping neighbors out there. But we really appreciate your support, John. Thanks for coming. And even though Oakridge is a unique community and you all have unique challenges, a lot of other places that have done similar things before. So it's taking those lessons you can learn and then adapting it to your own unique flavor and your own unique thing you got going on. And only you guys know that, right? So
Let's just go ahead and share our next meeting for the leadership team. That's gonna be coming up, Tuesday.
It was gonna be today, we canceled it, so it's a month from
Yeah, so it'll be the last Tuesday in November.
last
The
Tuesday.
26th.
26th, okay.
1 o'clock.
1 o'clock. Yeah, so last Tuesday or fourth Tuesday. Fourth
I
Tuesday
think, yeah,
at 11 o'clock is when the leadership teams are and open to anybody.
1 o'clock.
Sorry, 1 o'clock.
11 o'clock is our fire safe council, which you're also all invited to, which is the first Tuesday of the month, which houses this other committee, but, and we might be doing, talking about, the role of public health in disasters and emergencies at that next meeting, do sort of a training at that. So if you're interested in that, even if you're not part of the leadership team, encourage you.
So 26th, what you're saying,
I think that's right, Karen.
which is the day before everybody takes off for Thanksgiving.
Oh.
No. Is it the Thanksgiving? No, it
It
is.
is Thanksgiving. We might switch it to
I'm
the
just trying to
weekend.
put things in
Yeah,
perspective.
Yeah.
that's why we need everybody's brain, right?
Mhm.
Tuesday.
Yep,
Yeah.
Yes.
maybe we move it to the 19th, but we'll keep y'all posted.